Welcome to another exciting episode of Bumping the Walls here on CJSW 90.9 on that FM dial. And of course, if you missed us, don't worry. You can go pick us up in podcast land on the CJSW app and anywhere you may get your podcast. Although, honestly, folks, I've had some challenges with Apple Podcasts. I can't seem to get it, but hey, if you've got Spotify, that usually works. Or as I say, there is the CJSW app. And of course, we are broadcasting from Treaty 7 land. And with me, we have Taylor Bauer from CNIB. And Anthony, of course, you're here.
Yes, I am. And just for people who don't know what CNIB is, from now on, we're going to call it that because its actual name is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. So it will be known as CNIB from here on through.
Really?
Well, yeah, because people then know what's up.
Well, we know that. You know that.
Now everybody else does. When they hear that, they'll know, oh, okay. So Taylor is in charge of advocacy, and she works for Alberta Northwest Territories. So welcome aboard, Taylor. Thanks you for coming along.
And that's a lot of ground to cover, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It definitely is a lot of ground to cover.
So what happens in the land of advocacy, I guess, what would be the reason for it? It's a great thing to have, but can you explain to the uninitiated what it is and why it's important?
Yeah. So the term advocacy, really, to simplify it, right, means making positive change, right? So my role is very much in the lines of making positive change, whether that's with the individual and supporting them with self-advocacy, teaching them, self-advocacy skills, so, how to ask for the help that they may need or an accommodation in the workplace or to know what their rights are or how to deal with, a complicated situation that can access denial for a guide dog handler, things like that. So advocacy can also be, creating that positive change for the group, right? So maybe that's public education, breaking stigma, helping people understand what does blindness mean, right? We don't just all see black and that's it. It's a spectrum, right? Having those conversations. How do we engage with someone who has sight loss in a respectful way so that we can treat people like people and stop, the stigma and the issues that kind of present on a daily basis that our community faces. And then lastly, of course, it's more of that systemic change, right? So thinking about municipalities, transit authorities, government, all of that fun stuff as well is all part of my job. So there's a lot of different avenues. And it's all, again, about making that positive change, right? So that's why it's important so that we can really change the landscape so that people who are blind, low vision or deafblind, can live the lives that they want to live.
And that's just it. I think with blindness, there's other disabilities that may come along with that. So it's not just necessarily being whether you're blind, low vision. I'm considered low vision. Well, actually, my condition is retinopathy of prematurity. ROP is the acronym for that one. So since day one, and, in terms of, I guess, self-advocacy for myself, luckily through the school system, I was... folks would always bring in different equipment for me at the time. Of course, that's all changed. So I've been lucky that way. So, and as I said earlier, you've got you're probably the hardest working person in showbiz, so to speak, because you do obviously Northwest Territories as well. So, and certainly advocating can be difficult, whether you're, I've seen stories about people who have guide dogs, especially. They seem to always be trying to be self-advocates, and that could be difficult because... It
can be tiring.
You go to a restaurant, that dog's not allowed to be in here, although I can imagine, I'm sure these guide dogs do wear a service dog vest.
Yeah, well, I know that one all too well because, I do within my job, but also I am a person with sight loss and I have guide dogs. So I know the first-hand experiences very well, especially as it pertains to that topic.
So what can you give our sighted listeners as far as they see a guide dog, they should know not to pet it, but maybe they don't, right? What I think some of these issues that they're finding, that your community is part of the community is finding, is that they may be cultural. In some countries, dogs just aren't used the way they are here? I'm just guessing at a lot of this, so you can tell me if I'm on the right track. But how can others in the community kind of help us advocate when they see something like, oh, you can't bring your dog in here? What's the best way to handle that? I mean, I don't have a dog because I just don't have the patience, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Like, I think first, it's very important that that person who is, it doesn't have to be a guide dog. It could be for whatever reason. Maybe you're in the workplace and your employer's denying you your accommodation. Any kind of issue, and I guess we could put the guide dog just for this situation, but it's important to, have those self-advocacy skills, know how to control your emotions and, be aware of how you're presenting yourself, because if I'm really angry, which I have right to be if I'm being treated that way, but if I'm yelling at you and, pointing the finger and saying, using, we'll say, cursive language, they're not going to listen to you. Right? They're not going to understand. You can't really have an educated conversation, because if that person doesn't understand, right, how are we going to move forward? Right? We're able to control our emotions and be able to speak clearly and explain, what are your rights? What is the situation? So for this specific topic, your guide dog, what is a guide dog? Right? Maybe they don't understand. Right, I've come across many situations where sometimes there's a language barrier, and they think I'm saying guard dog.
Yes, I've seen that myself.
No. He's a guide dog or a service dog that's trained specifically for someone who is blind or low vision. Right, so having that conversation is super important. As a spectator, right, it's great to be an ally for any person that you're witnessing having that kind of situation, because often people don't stand up. Sometimes it's because they're scared. Sometimes they don't know the rules. Really, what we should be thinking of when it comes to service animals, right? If it's acting like a service animal, it's under control, right? On the hand that it's obviously doing a task like guiding. It could have a vest or a patch. It doesn't necessarily required, but if it's acting that way, and you can obviously tell the situation, then we should be treating it the same way as any other piece of mobility aid. Right? Someone with a wheelchair, someone with, crutches. If we see someone yelling at them saying they couldn't come into a restaurant or a store because they didn't want someone with crutches walking in there, someone would probably say something, right? We know that's wrong, right? So we see it as, the same. It's a tool to help someone with a disability. So I don't know if that quite answers the question, but I'm happy to
Yeah, I think so.
No, it does. A little off, I should say off topic, but it's along the same lines. I guess defining what a service animal is. Because in Alberta, it's kind of funny. I have my cats registered as therapy animals, emotional support animals, and a lot of times I run into, that's not considered a service dog. A service animal. Pardon me. Within Alberta. So I think Alberta laws need to certainly change around. Having said that, self-advocacy, since we're sort of, it took a little bit, but I did advocate for myself, which is difficult. Because it was the case of actually looking at the paperwork and finding out, actually they do not charge for having your therapy animal. This is in terms of housing. I should clarify that. And along as I have a letter from a qualified mental health professional. So I was very, very lucky in that regard, because I was able to call them out on their own paperwork and said, well, if you look at subsection, whatever, beginning of, let's say 12, and sure enough, they say that, and their response was, I'm sorry for the confusion. We don't get a lot of requests for that, which my thought was, obviously people don't take time to read their paperwork. Having said that, though, admittedly, I skimmed through, but I picked out points of interest. So a little bit of research, but certainly frustrating, because I think it's a societal thing, too, in terms of, people think, quote-unquote, service animal. whether it be a guide dog or a seeing eye dog is what I've heard of, another terminology. So I feel that under that spectrum, I don't know if you have, obviously you work with low vision and blind related issues. I don't know if you've run into that yourself.
Kind of. Like I think you did an awesome job, advocating for yourself. Part of that again is knowing what you're talking about, right? So you were able to say, hey, they're not understanding. Let me look into it, and you found some answers for yourself and really give you some direction and back your advocacy efforts. Super awesome. And I think it is a similar process. Like it depends on what we're dealing with, where people just don't always know what the legislation is, right? We have in Alberta specifically, right? We have the Alberta Human Rights Act, which gives, well, I'm thinking about guide dogs, but really any person that's under those protected grounds. So that could be someone with a disability, someone with a different, sexual orientation. It could be like there's a number of protected grounds, but we'll think about disability specifically just for this topic, right? And you have the right to accommodation, right? So whether that is, you need to have software installed in your computer like JAWS or Zoom text, right, to do your job, that's an example. Or it could be to be accompanied by a guide dog into public places, right, because that dog is there to assist you. Guide dog or a service dog, really. I usually focus on guide dogs because I'm focused on supporting the sight loss community because that is my role. Now, I did want to mention, just because you're welcome to edit this however you think fit, but there is legislation here, right? In Alberta specifically, each province has their own thing, but I'll talk about Alberta because that's where we are, right? So we think about Alberta Human Rights Act. I'd mentioned that one already. Thinking about a guide dog specifically, that piece of legislation says that you can bring a guide dog, or a person that is blind or low vision can have a guide dog accompany them to any public place, any place that is customarily open to the public, right? So that means a restaurant. That means Uber. That means grocery store. If the public can go there, someone with a guide dog can go there.
So that means, I'm just going to throw this at you because we've actually had this challenge. Not really. I'll lay this out quickly. So here at CJSW, it's a great place. But whenever we have a guest that's rolling through here that may have a dog, I always personally just make sure that I let, our podcast director know in case there are folks that are allergic to whatever, right? So they know that it's coming. And we've never had a problem yet. So, I've heard horror stories of people that have taken cabs, and the cab driver wants to put the dog in the trunk. Well, dispatch basically told them where they could throw that idea, and I don't know why they even suggested that, but they did, and it was rectified. So, yes, I guess what I'm saying is, what is the responsibility of the guide dog user? So, is it personally their responsibility to say to the agency or organization, I am coming in with a dog in case there are folks that are allergic to the dander?
So, no. So that is all about disclosure, right? So disclosure is your choice on when you want to disclose, right? Sometimes it's, I don't know if this is the right word, but involuntary disclosure, meaning it's obvious. Right? So if I walk into a place and I see a guide dog, it's pretty obvious that I'm working with a guide dog and I have some form of sight loss, right? Whereas, other situations, it could be a job application, it could be going somewhere, it could be calling an Uber, whatever it is your choice to weigh the pros and cons of whether you want to disclose beforehand, because both have pros and cons, right? So we think about disclosing beforehand could help with, I'm going to use the example of the Uber again, or a taxi, because that's usually a generic topic, that allows for you to get a driver that's okay with dogs. That allows for that. They can circle at the people who have allergies. Awesome. But what that could also do is say, hey, all the drivers that see you have a guide dog, okay, I'm not taking them. So you end up waiting even longer to get that ride than any other person, right? Same thing with Uber and things. I could leave a note and tell my driver and say, hey, I'm low vision and I have a guide dog with me. And all of a sudden I get driver canceled, next ride, right? So then it becomes, you weigh that out of, do you want to wait longer, potentially, right, and have maybe less issues with the end result? Or do I hold on to that and say, I don't have to disclose. I have a right to do this. Like, I have a right to have my guide dog with me and just partake in those activities as any other person. And so when the driver arrives, then again, you have to weigh those pros and cons. Is that driver going to arrive and say, hey, I don't want dogs, and drive away? Or maybe there's a conflict and you can talk through it and educate that person so that they understand. And eventually maybe you can have the ride and the driver knows. Or, the bad would be that they'd leave, right? But you weigh that out, right? So sometimes you might have to wait longer. Sometimes it could be shorter. It's just kind of playing on the person. When it comes to allergies, right, because I know that's where your question was kind of leading towards as well, whether you disclose ahead of time or in the moment, so if someone in that surrounding has allergies, they have the same rights as you with the dog, right? So we are equal in the legislation or under the law. What that means is that we would have to find a compromise, right? So depending on the environment, say the taxi cab or Uber environment, then that driver, we would have to call another driver to come. And while we're waiting for that next driver to arrive, the original driver should stay with the individual, with the guide dog or service dog, until the other person arrives, right? Because then they're leaving at the same time, right? Joe, the driver, isn't leaving ahead of time making more money while I'm waiting, right? We're equal. That's the same thing in any environment. Yep. So that could be, workplace, a restaurant, whatever it is. It could, that accommodation could be, or that compromise could be creating space, right? So maybe I sit in one corner of the room and the other person sits on the other corner.
That works,
Or maybe if it's a work environment, maybe we install, air filtration, right? So those are examples, and we got to make sure that the compromise benefits both people. We can't just say the person with the guide dog has to sit on the patio.
That would be hard to do your job in certain parts of this country, like Edmonton, which is
exactly
if it's wintertime or unseasonably warm or unseasonably cold, yeah.
Exactly. So it's all about everybody being equal. It's not about one person's better than the other. I get passionate about this topic, so I feel sorry if I kind of went too far.
Hey,
but
no.
I'm happy to answer questions.
Well, you didn't. That's what we're aiming for. So for those who don't know, this is Bumping into Walls. And what is it? Well, we bring the information and the issues of the vision loss community right to your door. So right now we're with Taylor Bauer. By the way, if you guys aren't able to check us out live, you can pick us up on the CJSW app or wherever you get your podcasts. So do you have any stories about younger folks that have gone through school? I mean, I know for me, I hated gym because PE was it was called report writing class because that's all I ever did. I would write reports on like volleyball and basketball and those would be hard to play, but I did a lot of other stuff, and I'm wondering if you've ever seen that, because you're a little younger than me, so maybe things got a lot better when you were in school than when I was, as things may have changed.
Yeah, okay. Well, I could talk about my personal experience, and then I could talk about kind of what I've heard from the people that I work with.
Sure.
So for me specifically, I mean, I guess I might be a little bit younger than you, Anthony. But I don't know if my situation was much better.
Okay.
I was in kind of more of a rural school for a lot of my schooling. And is that an excuse? No. But I didn't have, as much support as I probably could have needed. I didn't see, my, what would we call a TVI or teacher for the visually impaired, or what I call the vision consultant. I didn't see that. I've seen them like maybe once, maybe twice a year to get the support I need. So it wasn't very frequent. So one of the examples I can think of, especially in gym class, is that people just didn't know how to accommodate me, right? And of course, I'd still try, right? So I remember, I think this was like the 6th grade. I could be mistaken. It was a while ago. But there's one year that what we did is we played dodgeball. Every single gym class for that year. It was different variations of dodgeball. sometimes there was volleyballs and there was things you had to throw into the basketball hoops and like all this ridiculousness, right? But I still participated. What
Sure.
I did was I said, hey, this is definitely hard for me to do with my low vision. It's a safety hazard also. So I stayed at the very back, right? And I collected all the balls that I could find and I handed them to my teammates.
Hey,
Right? So
that
I
works.
participated. What happened at the end of that school year is my report card said, Taylor failed gym class. She needs to learn how to catch a dodgeball.
Excuse me? You can't even hear it coming.
Exactly. Right? So was my situation better?
No.
I don't know. But also, did I have the skills at that time to advocate for myself? Probably not really as strongly as I do. I notice there are kids that I work with or hear from, supporting in my role that, sometimes they encourage and they deal with similar things. And sometimes they're dealing with so much like better outcomes. There are some schools that are like, hey, let's have a whole session on goalball and
Right
let's
on.
have everybody try it. Right. But there's also a number of students that are dealing with that same barrier of either just not being included. Right. So they have to write reports or do something that's not fun. Or, like my circumstance, they're trying their hardest, but they're failing. Right.
And that's not anything to do with the student. That's to do with the teacher not knowing how to make it work.
Exactly.
So I guess also, so if I need help with advocacy, how do I go about doing that? Would I just call the CNIB? How does one get a hold of you in a way?
Yeah. Good question, right? So, it's going to be the same process whether I'm in this role or someone else takes it on. I hope to be here for as long as I can.
We hope so.
But, typically, if I'm not already in contact with you, right, you don't have my contact already, you can always call the 1-800 number for our call center and kind of just say, hey, I'm from Alberta. Make sure you give the location because it's a national call center so they know where to send you, and that you're looking for, advocacy support. Or, talk about kind of what, you don't have to go into full detail, but like just a synopsis of kind of what's the category of support you're looking for, and they should be able to direct you to either myself or the correct individual to support you. That's probably the best method. And or, if you're in Edmonton or Calgary and you have an office nearby, come and chat with the staff there. I'm sure that they would also assist with that referral as well. And or, provide one of my million business cards.
So what would be the number for the contact center, just in case people are looking for that?
That is a good question. I don't actually have it in front of me at the moment, but I can send it for you after. If that
I've got
works.
it. 1-800-563-2642.
Amazing.
Which actually turns into CNIB, believe it or not.
Perfect.
So that is good because I feel advocacy itself is it's not easy.
No, it's a slow process.
Well,
it could take years for things to occur, and you think, is anything happening? Is this a normal way of advocacy? Is this how advocacy works? Have you seen that where you start a project and maybe 4 years down the road you finally see a result, and so many people have just said, I'm not wasting my energy? They think it's a waste, but it's really not.
Yeah, I think there's the other thing I want to mention about you seeking advocacy support through CNIB is just to put a lens on it so that people understand kind of what support they're receiving, right? What are they getting into? And the biggest thing is, sorry, I'm not going to solve your problems for you, right? That sounds really bad, really harsh. But really, that's not my role, right? I'm not going to call your landlord and say, hey, Jimmy needs you to lower the rent. No, that's not my place. Right? But my role is more to give you the tools and the resources that you need to know how to advocate for yourself and to deal with that situation. Right? So that could be, what are the steps to advocacy, right? Identifying the issue, finding solutions, who do you talk to, all of that fun stuff. Mm-hmm. It could be about, talking to and brainstorming maybe some solutions together. I don't have all the answers, but I'm always happy to chat and give guidance that way. It could be, talking about your approach and kind of we could do a one-on-one session on how you want to approach your employer or whoever you're talking to. A lot of that support, and as well as resources I can provide. So I have a list of a number of, legal services and information that you can reach out to. My role is all legal information. I cannot provide legal advice because I am not a lawyer, right? If you don't go and see, the dentist to get information on, your health concerns with your body.
Let's
right?
hope not. Unless it's to do with dentistry, that's fine. But
exactly, right? So that's kind of my role. And if there's a specific issue, and again, the issue that I help with are issues with access and discrimination related to your sight loss, right? So those are the things that I can help you with, and it's a more complex thing. So maybe there's a kid in school that's not getting the support they need, right? Then there's some alternate or additional supports that I can provide, such as, I can attend a meeting with, the parent and the child in the school. Not, telling them, hey, yar, you need to do this, but there as their advocate, right? Saying, this is the legislation, this is what we're supposed to be doing, helping guiding that conversation, and really just showing that there's that external light or that external, person seeing what's happening, right? They can't get away with hiding behind the scenes. Additionally, we could provide, an advocacy letter of support, right? So that could be maybe if it's an accommodation in the workplace that your employer is refusing to give you, we could give a letter saying, we're not necessarily saying Jimmy's story, but we say, hey, under Alberta legislation, every person with a disability has the duty to accommodation. Once disclosed, you as the employer have the duty to accommodate, right? And we can go through that information so that they know really it's their job. It's their duty to do this, right? It's to be emphasizing, and we can also have it sent from different people in CNIB's desk, like our provincial director, or if it was a really serious thing, maybe from our CEO's desk. There's a lot of things that we can use to support, but again, it's support, right? It's not doing the work for you.
Well, that's important to know. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
So I do have a question. So there seems to be two levels to advocacy. I know you have your role in Alberta, but then I understand that there's also national advocacy. What do they work with? I know they may work with some government stuff. Maybe this is the wrong area, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
Okay, I will do my best.
Okay, that's all we can ask.
So my role, obviously, I'm more with provincial and regional things, right? That more hands-on approach. Our national team, they guide our national campaigns that we offer or promote throughout the year. So whether that's something on transportation or snow clearance is what we've done over the last couple of years. It really helps get those materials together and distributed so that we're, collectively across the country, we're doing this work. But also our national team does a lot of work with those larger stakeholder and government relations, right? So thinking about, that Uber relationship, or thinking about, government and preparing for elections, and, making sure that, government are thinking about the issues that we are, bringing forward. Does that kind of answer that question?
Oh, yeah. No, that's actually really good. What are the issues that you see that are coming in the future here? What kind of stuff are you seeing coming across your desk?
Across my desk?
Well, yeah, what kind of stuff in Alberta do you see that is really, if you could give us two that are the really important things that you see coming across that aren't personal, but are more for the whole community's benefit?
You're not going to let me pick two, huh?
Okay, maybe three. We'll give you three. What do you think, Dave? Three?
Well, hey, whatever she can come up with.
She can come up with whatever she can.
Yeah.
You throw curveballs.
Well, ideally, what I'd like to start with is accessible transportation, right? So whether that's public transit and making sure you have an accessible, bus or fixed route system, has, stop announcements, and the infrastructure is in place so that you, as an individual with sight loss, can successfully navigate your environment from the first step out your door to the last mile of your journey, right? But that also doesn't necessarily just stick to buses, right? So that could also be thinking about, accessible parking placards, right? Alberta is the only province in Canada that specifically says that if you have a sensory disability, so if you are blind or deaf, you do not qualify for a parking placard, right? Which is, that's the specific criteria, which makes it hard. Some people are able to get it because they can, their doctors can advocate for them, or they have additional needs. But in general, there's a large portion of our community that gets denied that.
I
that
tried,
tool,
didn't work.
Which could exactly, and it could be a beneficial tool. Anyone that could benefit from it
Right.
should be able to get it, right? Because navigating parking lots, super stressful, super dangerous, right? Thinking about slow-moving cars,
Ice and snow.
gear,
Yeah,
snow
ice
and
and snow.
ice, all of that. Like, it's crazy.
Anyways, I hate to cut everybody off, but I do see we're out of time here.
Oh,
The clock runs out quick.
It does.
And it does go by fast. So, Taylor, first of all, thank you very much for coming on the show with us today. And I hate to cut it off, but I'm sure we can go on for a long time. So once again, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I know it was a long time coming, and I'm always happy to answer questions and things following up. And I wish we had more time, but we'll take this. Hopefully it was impactful.
Certainly it was, and I'm sure it's impactful for our listeners. So I'm going to say farewell to all our listeners, and thank you very much for listening. And, of course, Taylor, once again, thank you. It was very informative, and we shall catch up again, I am sure, at some point when you come through Calgary or whatever, if you come out our way. So do take care. And everyone across, thank you very much for listening.